Shalom vänner, profetisk uppdatering 19 maj 2024. Idag på pingstdagen har Frihamnskyrkan före detta Smyrna här i Göteborg bön tillsammans med katolska kyrkan, kan vi läsa. Och enligt en av pastorerna, och vi får väl utgå ifrån att alla pastorer anser att de tror på samma Gud som katolska kyrkan och katolicismen. Det här har vi stora problem med, för katolicismen bygger på en mängd icke-bibliska läror. En helt annan grund, och då kan man faktiskt inte kalla sig kristen. När det går tvärs emot Bibeln och emot det som Gud har sagt. Ta bara nattvarden, eukaristin eller eukaristen. Där katolska kyrkan säger att Jesus offras oblodigt vid varje mässa. Hur många gånger som helst. Och det här är ju en hädelse. I Hebreerbrevet läser vi tydligt och klart, och utöver det överallt där det står om Jesu offer på Golgata, att han offrade sig själv en gång för alla och gav sitt liv, utgöt sitt blod till syndernas förlåtelse för var och en som tror och tar emot honom. Och att påstå att Jesus offras igen och igen, har ju med något helt annat att göra. När man förandligar detta så blir det ju ockult andlighet. När man tar och förvrider något så, det är hädelse. De påstår också att jungfru Maria var syndfri och kallar henne himlens drottning, och enligt Bibeln så är himlens drottning en avgud. Modergudinnan som var en avgud och väckte Guds vrede. När Israels folk föll och tillbad denna avgud. Och Maria var inte syndfri, för det är också hädelse. Maria behövde frälsning. Precis som alla vi andra. Det är bara Jesus Kristus, Messias, Guds son, Guds enfödde son, är den enda människan som någonsin var syndfri, är och var och kommer att vara ingen annan människa. Jag går inte in mer på det nu, jag vill bara uppmärksamma det här. Det är ju inget nytt, det har ju pågått i många år egentligen. I vissa kyrkor och i många kyrkor tyvärr. Men det är ändå värt att nämna, tycker jag. Jag vill istället här läsa ett par verser om den helige Ande idag, som då är pingstdagen. Apostlagärningarna 1 och vers 6. När de nu var församlade frågade de honom, lärjungarna frågade Jesus: Herre, är tiden nu inne för dig att återupprätta riket åt Israel? Han svarade dem: det är inte er sak att veta vilka tider eller stunder som Fadern i sin makt har fastställt. Men när den helige Ande kommer över er skall ni få kraft och bli mina vittnen i Jerusalem och i hela Judeen och Samarien och ända till jordens yttersta gräns. Är tiden nu inne för dig att återupprätta riket åt Israel, var frågan från lärjungarna, för de kände till skrifterna, Bibeln, vad som står skrivet, och de undrar, är tiden inne nu? För Israel var ju då under romersk ockupation, som vi vet när vi läser Nya testamentet. Jesus säger inte emot dem, men han talar inte om när tiden är inne. Det Jesus säger är att när den helige Ande kommer över er ska ni få kraft att bli mina vittnen. Det är det som är syftet med den helige Ande. Den helige Ande som kallas också hjälparen. Som ger oss kraft att vittna. Som ger oss kraft att följa Jesus. Att leva för Gud. Guds ande som tar sin boning i oss. Och detta händer på pingsten. Och det är det som den kristna pingsthögtiden handlar om. Men jag har ett speciellt minne från den här versen när Jesus säger att ni ska få kraft genom den heliga Ande då, bli mina vittnen i Jerusalem och i hela Judeen och Samarien och ända till jordens yttersta gräns. Jag satt en dag i köket i min lägenhet för många år sedan. Det är mer än 32 år sedan, för det var innan jag träffade Janne. Och jag satt där och var osäker på, för jag hade kommit tillbaka till Jesus då något eller ett par år innan. Och jag frågade, eftersom jag hade varit mycket utomlands, och frågade, ska jag stanna i Sverige? Ska jag stanna här i Göteborg? Eller har du något annat för mig? Och när jag satt i köket där med Bibeln på köksbordet och var i bön, då är det precis som hela köket fylldes av Guds röst. Det var så som levande. Det var som om jag hade hört Gud tala den här versen först. Men när den helige ande kommer över er ska ni få kraft att bli mina vittnen. Och det talar till mig, då ska du få kraft att bli mitt vittne. Och så upplevde jag att Gud sa till mig, ditt Jerusalem är Göteborg. Det var alltså där som Gud ville att jag skulle vara och stanna. Och där är jag än. Och där är vi idag, Janne och jag. Och Gud har bekräftat på många sätt att vi ska vara här och bo här. Så det jag upplevde här, det var liksom att Gud genom den här bibelversen bekräftade att jag skulle stanna kvar här. Ditt Jerusalem är Göteborg. Det är alltså den platsen här då. Innebörden är ju den platsen som där man ska finnas, där man ska bo och där man ska utgå ifrån. Och jag fick också uppleva det vi kallar dopet i helig ande. Och när Gud började tala om att dopet och uppfyllelsen av den helige ande, så tyckte jag, men jag har upplevt så mycket redan, ska jag få mer? Men jag förstod inte att det var det här som jag behövde för att bli ett vittne. Jag är inget vittne. Jag är världens sämsta vittne i mig själv. Men när den helige ande får leda och hjälpa, så är Gud är fantastisk. Och jag tycker han väljer väldigt konstigt många gånger för mig, men jag ser ju att han är med, och att just det att man får vara beroende av Guds ande, det är det som är det viktiga. Och det är Jesus vi ska vittna om, vad han har gjort för oss, att han ska komma tillbaka, och allt det som Guds evangelium handlar om. Men framförallt är det att vi behöver omvända oss till Gud, ta emot Jesus förlåtelse och hans frälsning, så vi får evigt liv och når målet. För ett av orden för synd i grundtexten är ju att missa målet, missa det himmelska målet. Det vill inte Gud att någon ska göra. Han vill att vi alla ska nå dit. Han har sagt innan och berättar i Bibeln att så kommer det inte att ske. Men vi vill ändå att så många som möjligt ska nå målet. Och jag läser här från Apostlagärningarna 2 från vers 1. När pingstdagen hade kommit var de alla samlade. Då kom plötsligt från himlen ett dån, som när en våldsam storm drar fram. Och det fyllde hela huset där de satt. Tungor som av eld visade sig för dem och fördelade sig och satte sig på var och en av dem. Och det uppfylldes alla av den helige ande och började tala främmande språk allt eftersom anden ingav dem att tala. Det var alltså inte tungotal där vi i vanliga fall talar om tungotal eller bönespråket som ett tungotal, utan det här var riktiga språk, alltså mänskliga språk. Så läser vi från vers 5. Nu bodde i Jerusalem fromma judiska män från alla folk under himlen, och när dånet hördes samlades folkskaran, och alla blev mycket uppskakade eftersom var och en hörde sitt eget språk talas. Häpna och förundrade sa de, är de inte galileer alla dessa som talar? Hur kan då var och en av oss höra sitt eget modersmål? Vi som är parter, meder eller elamiter, det är ju judar alltså som var från Iran. Det är en väldig väckelse idag. Vi som bor i Mesopotamien, Judeen eller Kappadokien, i Pontus eller Asien, i Frygien eller Pamfylien, i Egypten eller Libyen åt Cyrene till eller är inflyttade främlingar från Rom. Vi som är judar eller proselyter, kretenser eller araber. Vi hör dem tala på vårt eget språk om Guds väldiga gärningar. De var alla mycket häpna och förvirrade och frågade varandra, vad kan detta betyda? Ja, det finns mycket att kommentera här. Det här var ingen rappakalja som lärjungarna höll på med. De talade språk som de inte hade lärt sig och de predikade och vittnade om Guds väldiga gärningar. Det var det handlade om. Det var inte så att de betedde sig som berusade som vissa tror bara för att någon här senare i den här som berättas i Apostlagärningarna 2 menar att de var druckna av vin. Det står ingenstans att de raglade eller vinglade omkring. Det här är vad Bibeln säger. De fick språk de inte hade lärt sig och på de språken så talade de fritt och öppet och frimodigt genom den helige ande om Guds väldiga gärningar. Och det var inte bara judar här, det var proselyter, det var människor som hade konverterat till judendom, kretenser eller araber står det. Och vi kan ju tänka här hur evangeliet kan ha spridits till många andra genom de här, just här som var samlade den här pingsten i Jerusalem. Så spreds evangeliet helt naturligt. Det är Guds vägar som är förunderliga många gånger. Och det här med den helige ande, det får vi be om alla kristna. Det är ju den helige ande som är med när vi blir födda på nytt, när vi får tron, men vi får också be om den helige ande och att bli fyllda av den helige ande. För vi är beroende av Guds ande i allting när vi följer Herren. Så denna pingstdag, denna vackra, somriga pingstdag. Jag har inte koll på hur det är i hela Sverige, om det är sol. Jag utgår ifrån att det är sol överallt. I alla fall har vi det här i södra Sverige. Fantastisk sommardag faktiskt redan. Och vi får tacka för den helige ande. Jag kan bara kort nämna att när jag upplevde uppfyllelse av den helige ande, det var väldigt märkligt. Jag var ensam vid den där köksstolen jag satt den gången när jag upplevde att Gud talade. Det gjorde han många gånger där. Det var min böneplats nämligen. Och jag låg på knä en gång och bad. När jag liksom fylldes bara av, det var som en våg av kristallklart rent vatten i mitt inre, så upplevde jag. Och jag upplevde att det berörde både tankar, förstånd, känslor, allt i mitt inre var som att allt var i harmoni och allt renades. Det var en fantastisk upplevelse. Och det här kan man uppleva på olika sätt. Det här var min upplevelse. Och efter det så fick jag en väldig längtan efter att vittna om Jesus och berätta om honom. Jag kände mig så osäker och jag var så rädd att säga något fel till människor som inte stämde med Bibeln eller liksom säga något klantigt eller något som skulle missförstås. Jag var väldigt osäker. Men jag fick lära mig steg för steg hur den helige ande hjälper och leder. Och ibland få sopa igen våra spår, lite fula spår efter oss. Om man klantar sig, det kan Gud också göra faktiskt. Men vi ska vara beroende av den helige ande, andens ledning. Då går jag över till nyheter här. Senaste nytt här alldeles nyligen är att Irans president har störtat med sin helikopter och nu har det kommit bekräftelse på att han har dött. Iransk tv sa innan då helikoptern som bar presidenten har inte hittats ännu och det finns ingen information om dess tillstånd. I Iran rapporteras det att räddningsteamets sökning är fokuserad kring Sangon koppargruva, men dimman i området är mycket tjock och den horisontella sikten är mindre än 5 meter. Räddningsteamet är, ja just det. Och sen Amir Sarfati var det först egentligen som kom ut med den här nyheten före våra svenska nyheter. Glöm inte vem slaktaren är, skrev Amir, för den här mannen, Irans president, kallades slaktaren. Ebrahim Raisi, tror jag det uttalas, ungefär, var Irans högsta domare. Han undertecknade avrättningen av mer än 4 000 iranska politiska fångar. Ja, det här var väl antagligen då innan han blev president, utgår ifrån. Men det är samma man i alla fall som har dött i en helikopterkrasch, Irans president. Så har Amir Sarfati också skrivit på Telegram häromdagen. Varför öppnade inte Egypten porten? Israel avslöjar i Haag terroristtunnlar som förbinder Hamas och Egypten i en gemensam terroristkartellindustri. Mer än 700 tunnelschakt upptäcktes i Rafah, 50 tunnlar under gränsen till Rafah till Egypten. Korrumperade egyptier smugglade artilleri och utrustning till Hamas i Gaza. En möjlighet att Hamas-ledare och israelisk gisslan smugglas in i Egypten, alltså genom tunnlarna. Egypten hävdade att de översvämmade och stängde alla dessa tunnlar 2016. De stödde tydligen den dödsindustrin att växa och vägrade också att tillåta palestinska civila som ville evakuera sig själva tillfälligt från en krigszon att passera gränsen utan att betala $5,000 per person till den kartell som smugglade dem. På så sätt stödde Egypten ett terroristiskt folkmordsparti, alltså Hamas, för att växa och ha det artilleri de behövde för att försöka folkmord på israeliska civila. De stödde sedan folkmordsorganisationen Hamas genom att fängsla palestinierna i Gaza med en helt stängd gräns. Och stödde också den korrupta kartellen för att missbruka den situationen för att bli rika på den industrin. För att försöka undkomma ansvar för all den brottslighet som Egypten nyligen anslöt sig till, Sydafrika ligger i internationella domstolens cirkus. Ja, så kan det vara. Vilka fler visste om detta, tro? Undra på att man ville stoppa Israels IDF att gå in i Rafah. Höga toner, undra på det. Vi önskar ju Israels IDF all framgång. Men det är så här i den här världen. Det är så mycket ondska och girighet, och först som sist brukar det handla om avguden mammon och att göra pengar. Det är trist. En mörk värld. Men här kommer en video med Jair Pinto och Matti Shoshani på TBN som samtalar med Erik Stackelbeck. De diskuterar uppkomsten av antisemitism i USA och runt om i världen. Stackelbeck beskriver de våldsamma anti-israeliska protesterna som skakar högskoleområden och den farliga retoriken som riktar sig mot det judiska folket. Vad driver uppkomsten av antisemitism och vad kan göras för att bekämpa den? Och han berättar också att det finns 15,7 miljoner judar i hela världen, och det är mindre än 1% av världens population. Ändå lägger man så mycket skuld, liksom alla världens problem med Israels fel ungefär. Och Israel är som vi vet i samma storlek som Småland, ett pytteland. De tar också upp det som jag skulle tro att alla kristna Israelvänner säkert instämmer i, som förstår läget, att det här är ytterst ett andligt krig. Jag tror jag sa det i min profetiska uppdatering. Ytterst är det ett andligt krig. Och hatet mot judarna är både ologiskt, irrationellt och demoniskt. Men Gud vakar över Israel, och den som hatar Israel hatar Gud och Guds plan med Israel. För han kallar sig Israels Gud faktiskt. Därför att han inte har slutat att handla med Israel, och han har inte bytt ut Israel som folk eller land. Han har inte bytt ut Israel mot något annat land, utan hans löften gäller fram till tidens slut och Jesu återkomst, för Jesus ska komma tillbaka till Jerusalem i Israel. Och de tar upp i videon här, om man går tillbaka till det är den radikala vänster som är fientlig mot Israel i USA. Och det kan vi ju konstatera att vi ser samma mönster i Sverige. Kommer mycket därifrån som är väldigt otäckt. Innan videon vill jag bara läsa Hesekiel 36 och vers 24, där Gud säger: Ty jag skall hämta er från folken och samla er från alla länder och föra er till ert land. Det är bokstavligt. Det har uppfyllts och det fortfarande pågår. Uppfyllelsen, den bokstavliga uppfyllelsen av Guds löfte. Och Gud är trofast sina löften. Som Gud vakar över Israel, uppfyller sina löften till Israel och det judiska folket, så är han också trofast emot dig och mig. Tack och lov. Så önskar jag er en fortsatt fin pingstdag, Guds välsignelse och Guds shalom.
Hey guys, and welcome back. It's episode 5 of our TBN Israel podcast. I'm here at the studio with the one and only Yair Pinto.
It's good to be here with you, the second and only Mati Shoshani. And with us, we have all the way from the United States, a great friend of me, of Mati. And he should have been here sitting next to us in the studio, but yes. The flights decided to cancel his plane ticket. So that's super sad, but you'll be here with us soon enough. Eric Steckelback. Okay, he's the host of Steckelback Tonight on TBN, Monday to Friday, and he's been reporting the news about what's going on in Israel, sharing the truth from this land to the United States, to everybody who speaks English for more than 10 years. So it's great to have you, Eric Steckelback, with us tonight.
Guys, great to be with you. The third and only. That's my new title, the third and only Eric Stackelbeck. It is great. It is great to be with you guys. Hey, we should be in person, but we were saying before we started here, God's timing, I will be back in the land. And guys, it's interesting. I've been to Israel so many times, and it's my second home. Jerusalem is my second home. And I don't want to say take it for granted sometimes, but every few months I go to Israel. And now, since October 7th, it's gotten a little trickier with flights. So, needless to say, I appreciate being in the land now more than ever before, and I will be back very soon.
So today we're talking about something light and lighthearted.
Yeah, anti-Semitism, it's always raising up back again.
Yeah, always fun and a pleasant conversation. We're talking about anti-Semitism. This is a topic that I always used to believe would be something we talked about in past tense and in history books, and somehow it keeps coming up again and again. And it seems like the October 7th events were a trigger for all the hateful people, for all the anti-Semitics, for everyone who's been sort of harboring that sentiment in their heart for years, to finally have the excuse to come out and openly say that they hate and call for the destruction of the Jewish people and the Israeli people. And we've seen that around the world in an unprecedented way in recent months, across campuses in the US, across streets in Europe. I mean, just this wave of hatred and vile behavior towards the Jewish people and Israelis in general.
And it seems like whoever is supporting this wave of hatred is becoming more and more popular. Like, these are the cool kids in the campus universities, and doesn't make any sense. But I think that we want to dive really deeper into these topics. And we have with us Eric Stackelback from the United States to share the agenda of what is happening on the ground. So Eric, maybe you can share a little bit from your perspective what is happening in the university campuses.
Yeah, Yair, it is absolutely stunning. That's an understatement, really. I believe right now we are in a 1930s Germany type atmosphere. I don't exaggerate. What we're seeing, not only in Europe, of course, but right here in the United States, which, look, historically has been a safe haven of sorts for the Jewish people. Other than the land of Israel, the United States has been a great place for the Jewish people. I believe that's one reason this nation, where I'm sitting right now, has been blessed so greatly. But we see signs right now, guys, of slippage, I guess would be the best way to put it, especially among Generation Z, the younger generation. What we've seen on American college campuses, to me, has been horrifying. And this is open, Mati, you referenced this, these are open displays of genocidal anti-Semitism. I would say the mask is off, but they're all wearing masks and Palestinian keffiyehs, so half the time you can't even see their faces. Yeah. And these are, look, these are not pro-Palestinian rallies, guys. These are pro-Hamas rallies. And what's really striking to me is they're clearly well coordinated. Nationwide, this is coast to coast. Hey, America's a very big country. These mobs are gathering from coast to coast, not only on college campuses, but in major American cities, New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, LA. Clearly, they are well coordinated. They know exactly what they're doing. And the end game here is not just look, they're very clear. They're not just talking about the elimination of the world's one and only Jewish state. Yeah. They're talking about the elimination of the Jewish people writ large. And to me, the way this has come out into the open, guys, in such a stunning, forceful way, has been the big takeaway here. It's out in the open now, and anti-Semitism is the one thing right now here in the United States and around the world that can unite the radical left, radical Islam, and the radical neo-Nazi elements of the right.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Every time I hear about it, it like blows my mind that you have these like super liberal organizations and people, including gay rights organizations, that if they would just step in the Gaza Strip, they would be immediately murdered by Hamas. And then in these rallies, they are chanting together, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And they don't know that this organization, Hamas, is standing against all these liberal organizations completely.
But maybe they don't want to know. And this is a theme we often sort of end up as we have these discussions, is that when you try to find the logical explanation, it's not there at the end of the conversation. When you sort of follow the rabbit hole or the bunny hole, whatever it is in American English, when you follow that thought line, at the end of the line, you realize that it's not a logical thought process where someone says the source of this evil is these people, therefore 1, 2, 3, 4. It's people who don't have enough information, and yet their automatic response is hate on the Jews, kill the Jews. And it's people that should know better and know better. And we always go back to this conversation of, if you love the Jewish people, it's supernatural love. And you talk about this a lot, Eric. And if you hate on the Jewish people, it's the
supernatural
same.
Hate.
It's like, how can you 3 days after October 7th be chanting in the streets, calling for the death of Jews? It requires something supernatural in a bad way. Demonic is the word I think that I would use.
Yeah, definitely. And Eric,
it truly is. Guys, here's some numbers for you. In the world, and you guys know this, of course, there are 15.7 million Jews in the entire world. In a population of 8 billion, there are only 15.7 million Jews. That's much less than 1% of the world's total population. And the world's one and only Jewish state is the size of New Jersey, which is a very tiny place here in America. And yet, this tiny, minuscule people group and tiny country are apparently the cause of all the world's problems. Mati, as you said, that's insane. It's irrational. It can only be described as supernatural, as spiritual. This is a spiritual battle. Those who hate Israel hate God. They hate the God of Israel because the continued improbable, I mean completely improbable continued existence of Israel is proof of the existence of God. Every day that Israel continues to live and thrive, it's proof that God keeps his promises, he's on the throne, and he's got his hand on the land of Israel and the people of Israel. That's the only explanation for Israel's continued existence.
No, definitely. Thanks, Eric. And that's a key element here that I think only strengthen our idea that this is basically a spiritual war. Because it doesn't make any sense. Why would people waste all this energy, money, effort, international media focus on this tiny country with this tiny population? I mean, the world has so much bad stuff going on other than us, the Jewish people and the state of Israel. I mean, people have better things to do, literally. But we like to go into the minds of the other side. Okay, so we're like talking a lot of things about these protesters, about these university campus students. And I want to take you, Eric, into the mind of United States university students, and maybe you can help me understand what's going in his mind. How can a smart student go and protest and support Hamas? I mean, is there any reason that you can think of?
Two things, Yair, I think, that come into play here. Number one, among college students today, among Generation Z, and I'm not making a blanket statement among Generation Z, but among a large chunk of that generation, social justice, that's the phrase of the day. They want to feel like they're a part of something. They're a part of a movement. It's a very secular generation, but they want to feel like they're doing good. They're not living for the Lord or anything like that, because there's no faith in God among a large chunk of that generation, sadly, but they still want to feel like there's part of something bigger, part of a larger just cause. So social justice is where that comes in. The Palestinian issue is part of a larger theme. Funny word here, guys, not funny, but intersectionality. People might say, what are you talking about? What's that? It's this concept among the radical left here in the United States, and particularly on college campuses, that all of these issues intersect. Meaning, if you support the trans movement or the LGBT movement, abortion, critical race theory, those sorts of things, then you must also support the pro-Palestinian movement. Yeah. It's all or nothing. They all intersect, and all of these social justice issues must be supported writ large. And I think that is at play here in a major way on the campuses. And guys, other than that, I think it's just a clear case of, I hate to say it as a proud American, moral decay in this country, and a lack of leadership and a lack of parenting in the home to get even deeper. Because guys, look, when this first broke out after October 7th, we saw college students, quite literally raising hell on college campuses. Yeah. People said, well, look, they're 18, 19, 20 years old. They're just going through a phase. No, I did dumb things when I was a college student, but I didn't openly support murder and genocide. Big difference. Yeah. So what we have here is a complete moral collapse, and I think it starts in the home.
I have two questions here. I think you're exactly on point when it comes to like the moral side of things, but there seems to be more, and I think this is sort of the trouble I've had, and I think many Israelis have had. One, I'll frame it: the media perspective, and then the conspiracy. So the media perspective we have in Israel, and I think we talk about this quite often, is it feels like every big campus in the U.S., has just crowds of people chanting "Death to Israel" from the river to the sea, calling for, and they're very on point. They're very funded. They're very planned out and meticulous about the whole thing, and they're violent towards Jews, and they're violent towards anyone who opposes their opinion. So that's one thing. But and I feel there's a gap in the information we have. Because what we're seeing in the media, and I think this is a question to Eric, is this all the Americans? And I have trouble believing that. I think it's a handful of campuses. Yeah. And then I go to the conspiracy. We were talking about this with Dr. Phil's team last week, and several of the TBN team that were here. And the statement was, this seems too organized to be just like a grassroots movement. Yeah. This couldn't possibly be, and you see sort of the same faces, the same messaging. It almost seems like this planned out and rehearsed show, and it's a show of hatred. It's a show with the costumes, with the equipment that goes with it, and you look at it like, is this really what we're seeing truly representative of a large population in the U.S.? That's the first question. And the second one is, if it isn't, and this is organized, who's behind this? Who is promoting this agenda, and why are they promoting the agenda? Which is where I really have a problem. Because this is calling for the death of myself, my family, your family. Like, why are they promoting this agenda if this is indeed an organized effort?
What's the gain?
Yeah, what do they stand to gain from it?
Yeah. Mati, great questions. I'm so glad you asked. To the first part, is this a representation of the American people in a broader sense? Thankfully, no. Guys, consider these numbers. Yeah. Harvard University, which is it's one of the places where the protests have been taking place, not a bastion of pro-Israel support, needless to say. Harvard just released a poll just last week that found that 80% of Americans support Israel's war to defeat Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Not only that, 72% of Americans support an Israeli operation in Rafah.
You don't see
so
that.
I think, and those are
news.
stunning in a good way.
Yeah.
Exactly. And these are, and this is a Harvard University poll, guys. This isn't exactly Fox News releasing the poll, needless to say. So I think let's be encouraged by that. I think what you're seeing right now on college campuses, and Mati, you said it, this is a minority, no doubt, a small minority who are very loud and very vocal and very in your face and very chaotic, so it captures headlines. It's a major problem, no doubt. But in America, we have this concept of the silent majority. The average American who's kind of sitting back and watching this all unfold, they're not saying anything. Maybe they feel like they don't have a voice, but they don't like what they're seeing, and they don't like it at all. And many times here in the United States, they will make their voices heard at the ballot box when it comes time for elections. Guys, remember, November 2024 here in the United States, about 6 months from now, very consequential presidential election, needless to say. So we'll see what impact these protests, these mobs have on that. To the second part of your question, when it comes to funding for these mobs, this is what people have been asking a lot over the past few weeks. Wait a minute. This is all well coordinated. It seems synchronized, the messaging on every campus, whether it's elite Ivy League institutions or smaller colleges from coast to coast. Who's behind it? And the one answer is not surprising. Various foundations linked to George Soros, who is a guy, look, who's a mega donor to left-wing causes. Yeah, I mean, a billionaire many times over, mega donor to various left-wing causes.
But Eric, that's what's weird to
He
us.
happens to be Jewish.
It always sounds like this. The name is thrown out so often, it becomes trite. It's like,
Yes.
oh yeah, I've heard this before, And for once, it seems like there must be something to it. I mean, there probably is in other cases too. I just don't follow it
Yes.
close enough.
Yeah.
It seems like there must be something to it because it's so organized. It's so planned out.
Yeah. He's got this open society foundation where a lot, and I think sometimes the donors who donate to Soros, maybe they're indirectly helping to fund these protests. Maybe that wasn't their intention when they made donations to Soros's various foundations, but it seems that some of that money clearly is going towards these protests to prop them up. And I mentioned George Soros is a Jewish man. Many times people have said, well, if you criticize George Soros, it's anti-Semitism. That's nonsense. I mean, people are critical of him because he actually despises Israel, by the way. So people are critical of him because he has a sinister agenda. I know it all sounds, he's the boogeyman conspiratorial, but it truly is sinister. And why would he do this, Mati? You asked, why would he and these various well-endowed radical left-wing donors, why would they fund this? Because I think at the end of the day, their end game is the end of Judeo-Christian Western civilization. And that's not an exaggeration.
It's a big
and
answer.
it's interesting to me.
Very heavy.
It is.
Yeah.
And they have benefited more than anyone from our freedoms here in the West, and they've built small fortunes, even large fortunes in some cases. But the whole Judeo-Christian Western ethos, which is founded on Judeo-Christian biblical traditional family principles, which, by the way, which originate from where you guys are sitting right now, Jerusalem, they hate that because at the end of the day, and we referenced this a few minutes ago, these are people who despise God.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a traditional family unit based on biblical values, that's just something they can't stomach. They want to smash it. And one way to do that is to sow discord and to sow chaos along racial, gender, class lines, now along Israel-Palestinian, that clash. So creating chaos and sowing chaos is one way to divide and conquer, divide the country. And that's the end game. Divide Western civilization, and they're doing a pretty good job of it, I'm sad to say.
No, it's really sad to say. And from an Israeli point of view, okay, Israel and the United States has always been having, and especially I think now during this war, a kind of a love and hate relationship. Like on the one hand, they are supporting us and standing with Israel against this evil Hamas, and with official statements from the president and other officials. And then on the other hand, they say, hold out, don't go into Rafah, don't complete the mission. We're not sending you these sort of weapons. We can send you others, but not these specific weapons, because we don't want you to harm the civilians. So what's going on here? Is it like, is the United States-Israel relationship affected by all these protests that going on? Is the president affected by it because he's thinking of the elections? What's the real game here behind the scenes?
This has always existed. And Eric, I'm saying this from an Israeli perspective.
Yeah.
We always see the tension in like the American government policy. And it's usually between their desire to have whatever the specific foreign policy is, maintaining power, the projection of power, keeping the peace, promoting safe trade, et cetera, supporting its allies and the access of its allies. And the U.S. has done that incredibly in this war. I think where the tension is, I'm sure Eric's going to have something to say about that last line. Where I think things are interesting is how deep the tension runs now. Like I'm looking at President Biden. We love getting in the head of people. How much he has to fight against his base to support Israel. Yeah. Like he is actively taking fire for the most basic support that he's funding the Israeli government and the Israeli army with. And within his own government, within his own party, you have people that are calling for the exact opposite of his foreign policy. They're calling, to defund everything Israel related, to stop any kind of military aid, to cease anything that is supportive, even marginally, of the Israeli society, and is actively backing, these anti-Zionist, anti-Israeli movements. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, this is my perspective, Eric. You can't, but I look at President Biden. He's said some things publicly that are so strongly supportive of Israel, where you can tell the emotion runs deep, where you can tell the care runs deep. I wouldn't say there's love lost between him and Netanyahu, but that's, I think, outside of the point. It's on the personal level of how much the government has given us, but the tension seems to be just way beyond what it usually is. Usually it's, it's like, there's 10%, 30%. Yeah. Now it's just like, it's 150% difference between one guy and the other. It's a very bizarre situation.
It is. I think there's a few things at play here, guys. And Yair, you mentioned it. Again, look, the election in November 2024, these pro-Hamas mobs, and look, these young people, they're very vocal. Joe Biden actually wants that vote. These are people who are a growing segment of his far-left base. The Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party of, say, JFK or Truman or FDR today. It's a much different Democrat Party. Yeah. And there is a strong and growing radical left faction that is hostile to Israel. Joe Biden wants to and they're mostly younger, Joe Biden wants to shore up that radical left-wing base. Yeah. So he's trying to straddle two sides. He's trying to seem supportive of Israel on one hand, and on the other hand, he's trying to appease that radical left-wing flank to make sure he has them on his side in November come election time.
Is that possible, Eric?
You can't serve two masters.
I was going to say, is that even possible? We're not talking like a, splitting the difference kind of situation. We're talking one hateful, hatred, destruction, death, and, a death cult against Israel. And the other one is like, let's love and support the Israelis. Yeah. How do you bridge that?
I don't think you can, Mati. I think it's too, like you said, it's polar opposites. The two sides that he's trying to pacify, they can't be brought together. There's not really a middle ground there. Like you said, one side is death, destruction, the end of Judeo-Christian civilization, and the other side is Israel fighting the good fight, a righteous battle. He's been trying to thread the needle between both, and I think we're seeing over the past few weeks, it's just not going to work. Yeah. So he's gone in the other direction. He's going left, Joe Biden. And look, I think what he announced last week was a betrayal of Israel to publicly announce we're going to halt a weapons shipment if Israel goes into Rafah. Hey, the world is watching. The Iranian regime is taking notes. Hezbollah is taking notes. To announce that publicly, and that's been one of my big issues with this administration, all the dirty laundry and all the disputes with Israel are very public, and the Biden administration makes them public and leaks all these things publicly. There can be disagreements between friends. That should be settled behind closed doors, especially when the stakes are so high. America and Israel are facing shared enemies right now. It's an existential threat that both nations are facing. So this is a lack of wisdom in my view, and the Rafah announcement to preemptively tie Israel's hands, the shared enemies. Doing that not only weakens Israel, it weakens America. Yeah. And the shared enemies of our two nations are watching. He threw Israel under the bus in a very public way in front of the entire world. And to me, that was such a rupture in the relationship. We haven't seen anything like that previously. He can still, hey, behind the scenes, the Biden administration can still supply Israel with weapons, and they will, I'm sure, going forward. But in the Middle East, as you guys know very well, in many cases, optics are everything. There's what's happening on the ground, but then there's the perception. Yeah. And the perception right now is that there is daylight between Israel and America at the most perilous time for the Jewish state since 1948. So he couldn't have picked a worse time to announce this. By the way, during Passover or after Passover and on the eve of Independence Day and Memorial Day, he chooses then to throw Israel under the bus. Last thing I'll say, guys, they say that weak men create hard times.
I love that line.
And I think in the United States right now, we're seeing that play out before our very eyes. I think there's weakness in the White House. Our enemies know it. It's a dangerous time. And by extension, that makes things more dangerous for Israel because they just can't rely on the Biden administration, which, by the way, in the State Department and other levels of this government is littered with people who are hostile to Israel.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, Matti, I know that you have a topic that you want us to go to before we end
I want to go back to the money. I think that's, everything in life always goes back to the funding question.
Yeah.
Who stands behind this?
Who's making the money out of this?
And I think, Eric, you did a really good job of sort of wrapping up the conversation on who sort of the agents of chaos are in this game. And I think that's an important piece to understand, that some people have an agenda that is not linear.
Yeah.
It is, we want to shuffle all the cards. We want to break down the house with everything that's inside of it and then just rebuild from there. Mm-hmm. And destruction and chaos can be a goal. We see that with Hamas, and we see that with many of the terrorist organizations, and we see it with people that are working politically. Mm-hmm. We've even seen that inside of Israel. But here's a theory I've heard, and I think this is worth sort of delaying on, because it really is important to understand where ideas come from and who's funding them and what they're gaining from those ideas. People want chaos, maybe. People want violence, yes, but there are people that are fighting for gain directly. Case in point. So I read a bunch of years ago, there's a book called, sorry for the title, Sleeping with the Devil. It's a guy who's ex-CIA. Maybe you've heard of it. He talks about it was originally Saudi funding.
Robert Baer, yeah.
Robert Baer, yeah. Great book, and it's one of those books where you're at first you're thinking, is this all a conspiracy theory? And then you find out, no, it's true. Mm-hmm. And essentially it talks about the ties between, then it was Saudi, but it was not just Saudi. Saudi money, American politics through Ivy League colleges and research institutes. Mm-hmm. And then today, that version of that story exactly is the Qatari government. They're more sophisticated about it. They're doing Al Jazeera press, but they're doing heavy funding of U.S. colleges and at the highest level. And it's done in a very roundabout and a very clever way to get their messaging through the door.
And moreover, they're also the ones negotiating between Israel and Hamas on the hostage exchange deal.
We did a piece on this maybe a week or two ago, and you realize they're playing all the games at the same time. Yeah. It's not a double game. It's like a quadruple game at this point.
Definitely.
Where they're playing the U.S. axis, the Israeli axis. We want to be a Middle Eastern power.
Hosting the Hamas terrorists in their houses, in their hotels.
Hamas executives in their own backyard. And then at the same time funding the terrorism, funding the anti-Israeli and anti-Western agenda. It's all at the same point, and I think you have to end on that note. You have to understand that there are powerful parties at play, and they're willing to put a lot of money and a lot of resources and a lot of energy into a cause that ends in the destruction of everything that we hold dear, as Israelis, as Jews or Christians, or the combination of the two, as Americans. It comes against everything we believe in. And these people will stop at nothing to do that. October 7th, we've seen it with the Iranians, the Houthis, the Turkish actions. It's this never-ending line of people, and you follow the money trail, you find someone paying the bills at the end. And I think it's a terrifying but also a powerful lesson to be aware of, that there is an agenda at play. And there are people that want to gain from our destruction and our demise. And that's something we need to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely.
Mati, very, very key point. And Qatar, as you said, Qatar, look, I mean, pouring billions of dollars into American universities. And Mati, where does that money go at the universities? Here's where it goes. It goes to the Middle East studies departments at these universities. And it goes to hiring certain professors at these universities. What it does is it affects the agenda and the curriculums, what's being taught in the Middle East studies departments at these universities. So these departments are turning out rabidly anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian students in large numbers. That can all be tied back to that Qatari funding in many ways. Again, billions of dollars, $20 million endowments at elite universities in the United States funded by Qatar. And look, these universities, it's a quid pro quo. Qatar is not just doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. No, they have an agenda, they have a message, an ideology that they want spread throughout these U.S. universities. This is, look, molding the thought processes and the worldviews of future leaders. These are elite universities, so Qatari funding is having an effect in the classroom, and I think we're seeing the effects of that on college campuses right now. And by the way, what is that Qatari ideology? It's Muslim Brotherhood. 100%. Look, this is a Muslim Brotherhood-friendly regime. It's Hamas, by the way, is the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Mati, as you said, Hamas leaders are honored guests in Qatar. They have been for years. Al Jazeera is based out of Qatar, which Israel rightly just banned. And Youssef al-Qaradawi, there's a name for you, the spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. For many years, he was based in Qatar. So this is a very problematic regime, and I'm being kind to say problematic. It's worse than that. It's, in some ways, a state sponsor of terrorism in its support open of Hamas.
Yeah, and what I keep seeing is that all these terror entities and all these countries that support terrorism are playing the long game.
I was just thinking the same thing.
Now we're speaking too much time. We're spending so much time.
We're so weak as Westerners in thinking that way, and they just think 15, 20 years forward.
Yeah, exactly. We're thinking maybe 1 year, 2 year, you know, until the next election. In Israel, even less than that, because we never last 4 years, months. You know, maybe a year and a half. And they're playing a long game. They are nominating the students, giving them scholarship, that they will be the next professors of these universities that will rule the curriculum and will shape the minds of the next leadership. I mean, it's very hard to battle this sort of planning and strategic that Qatar and other countries are thinking ahead. I think that they are way ahead of us in terms of the Western society and our ability to battle these ideologies and methods. But Eric, we don't have a lot of time. I wish we had like 2 hours more. But I want to ask you some practical questions. Yeah. What should the United States do in order to battle these ideologies that are entering and taking over the elite American universities?
Well, I think number one, Qatar should be put on notice. This is a long time coming by the United States. Look, if you don't eject Hamas leaders, number one, if radical anti-Semitic ideology and messaging continues to come out of Al Jazeera, you're going to face consequences for that. Is it a decrease in Qatari-U.S. ties? Is it sanctions? I think there needs to be a much tougher line against Qatar. And look, we live in a capitalist, free society, obviously, but man, I think pressure needs to be put on these college administrations over where they're taking money from. Because Qatar is increasingly adversarial to the West, and China also has poured a lot of money into U.S. universities, and China, the communist regime there, is an open adversary of the United States. So I think there needs to be more accountability there, and look, the U.S. government could help to push these universities. And look, their funding, guys, another solution, federal funding for these colleges, for these universities, can also be cut. Yeah. Say Columbia University in New York City, which has been the epicenter of this anti-Semitic madness. Look, okay, if you want to do that, and your administration refuses to lead and be the adults literally in the room and end these protests, then we're going to cut funding to you. Yeah. There has to be consequences. There has to be accountability, not only for the universities, the university administrations, but for the people pouring the money in. And that could, if it's Qatar, if it's China, there needs to be, this is kind of, I don't want to say it's happened overnight, because it hasn't. It's been a long time coming, and you guys referenced it. This is a strategy. They're playing the long game, but now people in the West and here in the United States, as a result largely of these pro-Hamas mobs on campus, are now suddenly, finally waking up. Well, it's a little late in the game now, better late than never, but man, we need to be much more aware here in the West of what's happening right under our noses. And guys, especially because these are our kids. Yeah. These are generations of young people being brainwashed and misled by very sinister people at these universities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's another element here. What you're saying is exactly true. Transparency always works. And I think what's positive and what gives me hope is that on the money side, democracies know how to deal with terrorist organizations. That's one of the few areas where we actually know how to work with them, kick them out of the SWIFT system, sanction them, ban them, open the back door as far as like the financial transparency goes, and really track the money. The U.S., from what I've seen, has done a very good job of that in recent years with China. Chinese influence, Chinese technological espionage, a lot of the effect, and it's time for that to happen in other countries. But, and there's a big but coming, it's not enough to just know where the money is coming. I think people also need to have a deep understanding of why these things are happening. And I'd say one of the enablers of these anti-Semitic, hateful messaging sort of getting embedded within student populations is the fact that we have a generation of people that have a short bandwidth, and they don't take the time to research things properly. They don't take the time to read about it. They allow a tweet or a Instagram short or a YouTube video to dictate their worldview about an entire region in the world. And the antidote to that is obviously, one, being spiritually sound as an individual. So you need to be first having even kilter as far as how you look at the world, having a moral compass internally.
What's good and what's bad.
Yeah, and that comes from living a life of, as you say, Eric, Judeo-Christian values, of understanding that there is fundamentally good and bad in the world. And then on top of that, have a natural curiosity and a natural bandwidth or time that's given to research on a topic. And you look at how the Palestinian narrative has been successful in campuses, and how all these other countries have been able to sort of hijack people that had good intentions initially. They're able to hijack them by using the fact that they're willing to just accept a small bit of information. Yeah. So if people are watching this at home, I think that's one of the big takeaways. The takeaway is you have to go deep. Yeah. You have to know more than the headline. You have to know more than a 10-minute YouTube video or an 8-minute YouTube video or one lecture in the university. And then you couple that with true faith and values, with the Word of God, with an understanding of how this world operates, and then maybe then we can have a meaningful conversation with these people. Because right now we're at an impasse with them. I mean, it's people that have been indoctrinated for hatred and violence, and they need to be broken out of that. Yeah. And I think I want to end on another note, which I know is the spiritual warfare, which is oftentimes people are left at the end of this kind of conversation with a sense of dismay and despair. What can I possibly do? Mati in Israel, Yair in Israel, Eric in the U.S. And I mean, we have a platform, let alone if you don't have a platform to reach people. What can I do? And I think the spiritual side is very significant. You have to pray for something, and you have to speak the words of God into it. Yeah. And I think that's a good place to start. People underestimate the importance of that and underestimate the effect of that in their lives and on this world.
Yeah, definitely. And Mati, as you said, we always encourage people to understand what is happening in Israel, in the world, because we were called to pray for the situation. Yes. Okay, God called us to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. But for me personally, it's very hard to pray for something that is so vague and big, like Jerusalem for many people. I mean, for me, it's right here. It's my backyard. But for some people around the world, it's just a few books in the Bible. How can you pray for that? So in order to pray for something sincerely, you need to have a relationship. You need to understand. You need to know somebody from there or hear about a personal story. So that's what I encourage all of you to do, to find something that connects you to Israel, to Jerusalem, and then start praying and ask God to really tell you what to pray for. And then it will become personal and God will start working in your life. That's really what I believe.
Do you have any YouTube channels you would recommend, Yael?
Yes, definitely. I think that Watchman Newscast with Eric Steckelback is one of them. And he's going on, I think, 5 times a week.
He's about to hit 1 million subscribers.
Yeah, for more than
pushing for 1 million.
More than 10 years, 13 years or something, right? So I really encourage you to go and search for Eric Steckelback online or on the TBN channel, Steckelback Tonight, every evening, and he's doing a great job. And if you have a question or an idea, why should I, as a Christian who doesn't live in Israel, who's not Jewish, should support Israel, he will have the answers. Because Eric, you keep saying whatever happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East. And that's so true. So unless we battle the issues in this region here, they will spread to the United States, to Europe, and they will reach all of our houses in the backyards. Okay, by the way, guys, I wanted to share that we are doing this podcast every week. And we have more programs and more ideas of new programs. And if you want us to create additional videos from Israel, from this land, and from the Middle East, please consider making a financial donation that will help us to create additional content, additional topic, and basically keep this channel interesting and alive. So in order to do that, you can either donate on the YouTube donate button or go to our website at www.tvn.org/Israel.
And I'll add to that, Yael, that we love hearing from the people who watch our content. We love hearing, and this is part of Israeli culture, if they don't like what we said or they disagree. But we also want to hear if there's something specific people want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to say. We love engaging. We want to hear if people want to know more, want to hear about a specific topic. This is exactly the place to do that.
Yeah, and by the way, Mati, one of our viewers asked a question and said, why are we using the term the Palestinian state or like Palestine in our show? And I think that's a topic that we should create a full show on and discuss about what are the Palestinians, what is the Palestinian state, is there a Palestinian state?
I think that's going to have to be an hour-long podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, but by the way, yes, I read the comments, and that's a topic that people want us to discuss. We keep asking you to share this content and to help us spread the truth of what is happening in Israel and in the Middle East, so that everyone will know how to pray for the situation. And in order to do that, we need your help in sharing this content. In order to share it and to spread it, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel and you can share this content with people you know. You can also comment and like these content and these videos. It will really help us.
We love creating content that people enjoy watching and listening to. So if you liked what you heard today and want to learn more about what is happening in this part of the world, make sure to subscribe. And we always say this, Yael, this really gets us going. It keeps us going to know that people at home care about what we're talking about, care about what's happening in this land. So make sure you share this content. Make sure you subscribe on every platform you watch it. And just send it to one more person because it means a lot. There's a battle for media and there's a battle over information in this world. And we need the truth to come out from this land to the rest of the world.
So, Mati, Eric, thanks so much.
Yair, thank you so much.
Eric, I want to finish on a high note. You half quoted a saying earlier. And you said it's soft men bring hard times. But the full saying is that soft men bring hard times, but hard times bring strong men, or virtuous men, I think is the right way to say it. And virtuous men bring the good times. And I look at everything that's happened in the last 7 months, to myself personally, to us as a nation, to the world that's been sort of like, in upheaval about all these events. And you can look at it as a negative thing. And you can see in the bad, in the uncertainty, in the hardship, an opportunity for clarity and an opportunity for change. I think that's a very powerful thing to remain with, to hold on to. For us personally, and I think for people in general. Find certainty in God's faithfulness. Find certainty in the fact that hardship can bring growth and change, and hold on to that.
Yeah. Eric, do you have maybe a closing sentence to our viewers about this topic?
Yeah. I want to second what Mati just said, Yair. Israel is my example there. I was in Israel in February with you guys, And I noticed we talk about hard times creating strong people, people of courage and conviction and unified. Man, what I see in Israel right now, what I saw among the younger people, hey, I kind of hit Generation Z here in America earlier when we were talking. They're educated by TikTok University, it seems. But Generation Z in Israel is amazing. I've been so impressed by the young people in Israel answering the call and defending the nation. What character these young people in Israel have. So that to me is so encouraging that Israel's next generation is stepping up to the plate like that. And Mati, you said it. I mean, these hard times, and this may be the most perilous time in Israel's modern history, this very difficult, unprecedented time is really producing young men and women of valor and character. So that's very encouraging to me to see. And a last word of encouragement. Look, we referenced this earlier, but for Israel to not only survive, but continue to thrive, to persevere. Hey, poll after poll shows that despite all the chaos, Israelis are still among the happiest people in the world. How does that even happen? Only God. Yeah. So just to remind people, because the food's good, that's a real answer. But only God, and hey, God is on the throne. God is in control. You know, somebody here in the U.S. says, someone that I'd like to watch, that things aren't falling apart, they're actually falling into place. And I think we're witnessing the prophetic chess pieces moving on the board now, and Israel, Jerusalem is at the center of it. So fasten your seatbelts. I believe the most glorious days for Israel and the Jewish people still lie ahead. And for the church, it's not going to be easy. Jesus never said it would be, but it's going to be good. We have to be shoulder to shoulder together, Jews, Christians, together in this fight, because we face shared enemies, but God has an incredible plan for his church and for his land, the land of Israel.
Love that.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much, Eric, for being with us. And you'll come again for sure, don't worry. And we have a seat right here next to me with us. And thanks, Mati, so much. I'd like to thank all of our viewers watching us at home. And if you enjoyed this podcast,